Now to the NFL, where America's Professional Football League is in the spotlight once again for its seeming lack of diversity when hiring head coaches. In a league where 70% of the players are black, the NFL currently only has 4 minority head coaches.
Dennis Dodd joins us now from Overland Park, Kansas. He's a national college football writer for CBSSports.com. Thank you so much for joining us. So, can we talk about the Rooney Rule? The Rooney Rule, right? Because this was supposed to turn things around. Explain exactly what it is.
The Rooney Rule was started in 2003 by former Pittsburgh Steelers owner Dan Rooney, who saw an inequity in coaching hires. And it established the fact that teams had to interview minority candidates whenever they replaced a head coach or people in senior football operations, coordinators, assistant coaches. But increasingly, guys, instead of opening that door, it's become a floor or a rule for teams to hurdle over. In other words, well, we brought in our minority candidate, we got through with that, let's move on and hire the guy we want. So increasingly, these guys, I'll say the word, they become tokens in getting their foot in the door in a sport where, by the way, at least 60% of the players are minorities, mostly African Americans. The popularity of this sport, the money that's coming in, is built on their labor. They're not being represented in the head coaching place.
So, all right, so what are some recent examples of where the Rooney Rule has sort of failed?
Well, I wouldn't say failed because all the teams are adhering to it. If they didn't, we'd hear about it. But you got to look at a situation out in Arizona with Cliff Kingsbury. He was a losing coach at Texas Tech. By the way, he was Pat Mahomes' college coach. Pat Mahomes played in 1 bowl game in 4 years at Texas Tech, so figure that out. Cliff Kingsbury was considered an offensive genius. He is very good offensively as a coach. But a losing head coach in college who had just lost his job and was a coordinator at USC for about a week or two, got a head coaching job in the NFL. Meanwhile, a guy like Eric Bieniemy, who's here in Kansas City as an offensive coordinator in the Super Bowl, has been in the league, as I said, 13 years, has been a coordinator offensive for 4, and is Patrick Mahomes' offensive coordinator, did not get a job this cycle.
So it sounds like what you're saying when it comes to the Rooney Rule is that the NFL has not been sincere about the purpose and about the outcome. But then 10 years ago in Oregon, they basically passed a very similar law where they made it, sort of mandatory for schools to interview at least one qualified being the underlined word, minority for all head coach or athletic director positions. And it worked. They are diversifying. Why did it work in Oregon and it's not working for the NFL?
Very similar to the Rooney Rule. You're right. It's 10 years old and has worked spectacularly in Oregon. The last 2 football coaches at the University of Oregon have been Mario Cristobal, a Cuban-American, and Willie Taggart, an African-American. I think both athletic directors at Western Oregon and Portland State, track and field coaches. There are only 7, I think, NCAA schools in the whole state, but they are very diverse. I would say simply this for Oregon. It's a very progressive, liberal state. This took some activism over the years by a gentleman named Sam Sachs. He's a private citizen. He would drive from his job in Portland 40 miles on his own money to the State House in Salem to lobby legislators. That was the biggest reason it passed. And I will tell you this, in most state houses, the political will just isn't there for something like this to pass it and then enforce it. Oregon is that outlier.
There are so many friends of mine who are not turned on by sports anymore, specifically the NFL and the NBA to some extent, because of what you pointed out, which is the majority of these leagues, the majority of the athletes in these leagues are African-American or Hispanic, and there is no diversity at the head coaching level. So how is the NFL responding to the lack of diversity?
Well, mostly, lip service right now. They get these guys in the pipeline, but they're not promoted. The Dallas Cowboys, the face of the NFL franchise, hires a retread in Mike McCarthy, and not disparaging Mike McCarthy, but he does have experience, and I'm sure they adhere to the Rooney Rule, but there are guys out there. I will tell you this, part of the problem is, at least in the college space, that advocacy has kind of gone away. Not that people shouldn't adhere to minority hiring, but there used to be an organization called the Black Coaches Association. That went away. The gentleman who ran it retired. There's now one called the National Association for Coaching Equity and Development, run by Merritt Norvell, used to be at Michigan State. I called the number on the website yesterday and said it had been disconnected. Now, it's still active. I talked to Merritt last night, suggested to me, like I've been saying all along, I think there's going to have to be more individual activism by coaches and these organizations. He said every time these colleges don't hire a minority, they're not interviewing a minority, not getting a depth of pool for their candidates, they're violating Title VI of the Civil Rights Act from 1964. That's a whole other segment. But you can see where we're at right now.
Yeah, I was thinking, it really has to almost happen at the state level, at the school level, because then they will produce coaches with enough experience that they could be elevated to the NFL level, you know?
Right.
So listen, we're focusing on the NFL, but what about other major league sports? Are they sort of under the microscope for this as well?
Well, the other major league sports, I don't think have as tougher rule, I should say, as the Rooney Rule. They wanted to concentrate on, it has the biggest effect on everybody in the country, is the NCAA. And they've been mostly standing on the sidelines. They have initiatives, they have handouts, they have websites. But anytime you ask them about this, well, this is membership driven. We can't force schools to adopt something they don't want. I think that's a red herring. I think that's false. In the Penn State case, the infamous Penn State case, they interpreted their constitution, a board of directors in a closed room, to penalize Penn State after the Jerry Sandusky scandal. How about interpreting your constitution to mandate schools to give at least one, get one minority hire every time you have an opening? I don't think it's that hard.
And I also wonder, when you talk about sort of activism too, I wonder if it almost also comes down to like the players, like if you're a great player and you have a choice between schools, right? Then maybe they can also make a decision or put pressure on schools by the choices that they make, what schools they want to play for.
Right.
I think it's mostly activism by the coaches. I mean, the players, yes, the players realize this. They know what the situation is, but it doesn't impact them directly. It's for the coaches getting their chances. And look, the guys that have jobs usually aren't going to make any waves. And I'm not disparaging them for that. The coaches that are out there are highly successful. Yeah, I don't think this is a player thing. I think it's going to have to be outside sources, maybe lawsuits. Everything's a lawsuit, guys. Maybe that comes.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Money always motivates,
It
right?
does.
Dennis Dodd, thank you very much.
You bet.